Yeah, we said, get our seats were,
Of course.
No, I don't believe this.
Mr. Hitman, how are you?
so, I tell you that, Dave and Steve, they bring a crowd. I tell you, this is the biggest
Yeah,
crowd
this is
we've
good.
ever had here.
This is
Hey,
good.
look. So, it's really a pleasure to invite you, all of you here and for the evening. And I know that we'll all be thrilled by the presentation. We've all been thrilled by our dining experience at the restaurant, and now we'll be thrilled by what we hear. So it's really a natural for, because when the union of the Foglettos and the Rubertons brought just a pile of Hammonton history together, and as Dave will go over tonight, but Dave and Steve, both graduates of Hammonton and both members of the community, so it's a great pleasure that with that I turn the program over to Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Hi, everybody. You all know my name, Dave Ruberton. I know most of you. Thank you for coming out tonight to the Canoe Club. It's really nice in here. Back in December, a waitress come into the kitchen, and she says, there's a gentleman out at the bar who wants to talk to you, either you or your brother. So I said, okay. Went out to the bar. It was Mr. Parkhurst, and he proceeds to tell me that the Historical Society is doing a series of ancestry families in Hammonton, and would I like to come speak? And the whole time he's talking, I'm thinking, damn, I had a 50-50 chance that Steve might have got to him first. All right? But here I am, all right? But guess what? It turned out to be a lot of fun. I got to do some research and jog my memory. My Aunt Judy, my mom, they helped me with a lot of the older back information that we could put together, and it turned out to be fun, and I hope we can have some fun with it tonight. I guess we'll do ladies first, because both sides of my family were founding, are you allowed to say fathers now? Founding people of Hammonton, okay?
They were people.
So I guess we'll start with Mom. There she is, Nancy Joyce Fogletto. Her great-grandfather was Angelo Fogletto. He left Italy with his 4 children and wife. Her name was Rose Beale, not a regular Hammonton name. They left for Monterodone, Italy, which is in the Napoli-Don region, best I can tell. In 1876, they went to Philadelphia. He worked there for a while, and eventually, about a year or so later, bought a farm in Hammonton on Bridge and Plymouth Roads, out behind Arena Oldsmobile, and he started a blueberry farm. And it was working out well. He had a son, Benedetto. He had other children too, but I don't know much at all about them. But Benedetto was my mother's grandfather. So Benedetto worked the farm, and he loved the farm. They say he had a real love for the soil. I don't really know exactly what that means, but he really enjoyed what he did. He worked on the farm and enjoyed his work there. He loved it, and many people loved him as well. He was turned out to be a real man of the town. He secured passage and sponsored many immigrants to come from Italy to Hammonton over those years. Because back in those days, as I'm sure you know, you needed a sponsor to come here. You couldn't just walk in as they do today. So it was a process, and he helped a lot of people, from what I'm told, get here, along with a lot of other of your ancestors did the same thing for these people wanting to come to the new country. They wanted to work hard, and they wanted to melt in to America, and that's a terrific thing. He married Angelina DiGiacomo. He had business dealings all over Hammonton, land, buildings, with various people. He had the farm. He was also a tax collector in Atlantic City. He worked for Nucky Johnson of the famed Boardwalk Empire fame, which is really pretty neat. I would love to hear some of the stories, but I guess we won't. And that's really something. He started Star Bottling Company. Now this was just before Prohibition. They bottled soda and beer, but I guess he saw the handwriting on the wall and they phased out of the bottling company a little bit before Prohibition. And then a little while later, he started the Central Cafe, which is on the corner of Orchard and Railroad, as you're all familiar. It's been in this town, the Central, for, I don't even know how many years, over 100, I'm sure. And he had partners there with that, but I don't know how much he actually ran of the cafe. I don't think he was in the kitchen stirring a pot, but it was his and partners, and that's what he did for a while. It's kind of funny that it all stays in a circle. Here I am in the bar business. So I thought that was pretty interesting, that he had a start in that as well. He had 6 children. Nellie was the only girl. She married Tony Molinari. That's my cousin Danny's grandfather. He worked at the bar at the Central also, and ran the Central also. But then he left a few years later to open up Tony's Bar, which was right across the street from the townhouse in that parking lot. And he ran that for a few years as Tony's Bar. And then in 1949, they built the townhouse. And they tore down the old bar, and it became a parking lot. And he had 2 children, Rita Benedetto, Danny's mom, and Dottie Cardica, who we just lost a few months back. Well, I guess it's almost a year now. Both sweet, sweet ladies. They not only taught school, but they managed to be in the bar and restaurant, as they had a menu and very good food back then as well. And they managed to run that place as a family operation along with their husbands, Danny and Ray. Great people. It's funny, like I say, how things come around full circle. It's just uncanny. Then there was Uncle Bill, William. He was the gambler. My mother said there was always a gun in the room and stacks of cash, or broke. It was never in between a gambler's life. You know, it's funny, being in the business as a younger person years ago, some of the older guys back then, who are gone now, used to come in the early years and tell Steve and I the stories about Uncle Bill's bus in the woods outside of Hammonton, and that's where he ran his casino. And people would come apparently from all over to go to Uncle Bill's little, I don't know just what he had in there. I guess perhaps I want to have to use their imagination after that. But it was for real, because there was more than one old timer that told me about it. So I thought that was pretty neat. That's a guy I would have liked to have met. There was Floyd. He was the youngest brother. Poor Floyd. He was a little slow. Not a lot of people knew. A lot of people knew Floyd. Some of the older folks here certainly knew Floyd. He was the baby, and he had born with a club foot, and operations and anesthesia, I think, took its toll on him, and he was a little mentally slow. But even at that, he managed to hold a job his whole life, taking tickets at the Circus Drive-In. I know some of you can remember him riding his bicycle down 8 Carver Road to go to work and back home again. I mean, people don't do that anymore. If they can get the check, hey, take the check. But he went to work. And he was also a really proud Mount Carmel member, and his picture still sits on the shelves in Mount Carmel Hall. And you could see him every 16th of July, like a clock. He was there carrying the flag and doing the Mount Carmel procession. You could set your watch by it. He was the original dunker, I like to call him. Because when I was little, I would stay at my grandmother's sometimes, and he lived with my grandmother and grandfather for quite a while when I was just a wee thing. And he would come down every morning, and he would have his toast and coffee. And when he dunked, I mean, he was concentrating. And so it was just a memory you have, little things, right, that you remember about somebody. And that's one of the things I remember. There were also two other sons who I know almost nothing about, except that they died in their early 20s of the Spanish flu. So not much else that I know about them. So, where am I at here? Charles was the oldest son, and my grandfather, my mother's father. He ran the farms, and he also expanded the farm to Liberty Street. Right across the street from the old high school on Liberty was all blueberry farms. I can remember it well. I can remember being there in the summer, and the other farm too. And it was just great for a little kid to be on a farm. It was a terrific way to spend time in the summer. Ride in the back of a pickup truck, running around in a barn, learning how to prime a pitcher pump and wash your hands with dirt. You know, it's just good stuff and stuff you don't forget. Yeah, it's just neat stuff. I can remember him in the house. They lived on Orchard and 2nd Street in a big old house. It's not there anymore. And I'd sit in his lap. I guess it seemed like hours, but you know, it always seems longer when you look back. It was probably only 15 minutes and it was like done. But he would tell stories about trains and hobos. You would have liked him, Tom. He was a storyteller, trains and hobos. I can still remember, I think at that young age, it put a little adventure in my spirit to hear these stories when you're so little. And it was good stuff. He died fairly young. I was only maybe 10 years old or so when he passed away. Needless to say, he figured out already that I have lots of cousins. That could be a good thing, but not when you go on your first date to the carnival, of course. Where else would a Hammonton kid go on his first date? And a few days later, you tell your mom, oh yeah, and it turns out it's your cousin. Well, not first cousin, not first cousin. But what do you got? I mean, it's just the way, it's not tough enough, right? When you're that age to get a date, and then to be related to half the town, it really cuts your odds back quite a bit. My mother, it's the sweetest thing, and some of them are here tonight. Her and her classmates still get together all these years later. I won't say how many years, but many years later, still get together for lunch and coffee and this and that. And there must be 8, 10, 12 of them, and I think that's a really terrific thing. I guess it's a Hammonton thing, I really do think. And 2 of 1, they all tell me how sweet my mom was, and it still is. God bless her. A big takeaway from this so far that I take away is that all these people helped others. That was the thing. They helped others come to Hammonton. They helped others do all kinds of things. I mean, for example, there's my Uncle Ben. Oh wait, I'm jumping ahead here a second. I'm jumping ahead. Let me get back to, yeah. I'm with it. My grandfather, Charles, he married Nancy Serappa from Waterford. And they had 3 children. Joan, Aunt Joan, Joni, whose real name was Joanna. She was a teacher her whole life, sweet lady. She passed away about 15 months ago. I was so sad to see her go. She was really a sweet, sweet person. There was my Uncle Ben, I guess he was probably named after Benedetto, but they changed it to Benjamin at this point. And he was an educator also. He's 91 now, and he's slowed down a lot, and he rarely leaves his apartment. I think maybe there's still a bunch of people in Hammonton that ask me about him from time to time. He used to come visit my mother often, and they'd have coffee, and then she lives right above the building. So they'd wander down into the kitchen sometimes and tell stories and talk and what have you. And I'll never forget the day I'm cooking at the stove, and he's telling this story, and I'm listening. And he says, you know, when the Fogletto brothers got to Hammonton, they used to come to visit your great-grandfather Benedetto and your grandfather Charles, my mother's dad, because they taught the Fogletto brothers how to plant the shoots and how to plant the bushes and how to make them grow, what to do and what not to do, because they had already been farming for a number of years. And I'm listening, and I turned that pot of gravy, I put the spoon down. I said, you gotta be kidding me. I said, my buddy Paul, golf partner and good friend, is lording over 1 million acres of blueberries right now. And I'm sitting here stirring this pot of red gravy. I said to my uncle, I said, we went wrong somewhere. I mean, this is crazy. But everything turns out for a reason, and it's all good, though. It's all good. I haven't missed a meal yet. I'm happy to say. So, and you can't eat blueberries all the time, right? So that's, yeah, I remember he had lots of stories. I won't bore you with them all. So, the big takeaway, all these people helped others. I may have mentioned that already, but I really mean it. They helped strangers, they helped people come to Italy, they helped build this town. Not just my family, but all the families that came to Hammonton. They had one thing in common, that what I can see is they wanted to work together to make a good family community. And it really worked. It really, really did. And it shows. So, like I told you, I have two sides. I have my dad's side. I need a sip. I'm getting a little dry. My father's side. My father was Rocco Lewis Ruberton. His, I should have made a note of this, great-grandfather, Michael Ruberton, with an E on the end, came to this country in 1873. He left his wife, Anna, and 4 kids in Anzi, Italy, which is also in the Napoli-Don region of Italy. It was almost the same year that Angelo Fogletto was in 1876. So they were only a few years apart. And he came at the urging of a Mr. Nicolai, who, that was a Hammonton name around here, and they had a construction company, from what Danny has told me. And he was urged to come here, and he went to Pleasant Mills Road, lived on a farm, and learned how to farm. And then he eventually opened up a store. He had his own farm, and later opened up a store on Bellevue Avenue, a butcher shop and grocery store, for a whopping total of rent, $10 a month. How you beat that? His son, Rocco, my great-grandfather, arrived here when he was 17 years later. Like I had mentioned, he had left his wife and kids in Italy, and he was here for a number of years before they came over. I don't know exactly how that works. I don't think that would fly today, but back then, I guess you sacrificed for the rest of the family and future generations. And I guess that was the sacrifice they decided to make to get roots into Hammonton. Either that or he was having a really good time and decided to stall it off for a little bit. I don't know, we'll never know. But at any rate, my great-grandfather didn't get here till he was 17, a number of years later. Somewhere between when Michael got here in 73 and 1885, when my great-grandfather got here, the E was dropped off of the name. And it happens a lot. I guess to Americanize the name, people were, I don't want to use the word persecuted, but you know what I'm saying. Looked down upon, I guess, maybe second-class citizen. I'm guessing. But anyway, the E was chopped off of the name somewhere in that time frame, and it's been just Ruberton ever since. And it's funny, a name, and even just a letter on a name, can mean and do a lot. I have found that out firsthand. I remember my first real restaurant job was at Larry's Pier 111 in Acco, and I was just young. I guess I was 17 or so, about that. And the fellow that hired me, with no experience and no anything, was Jewish. And I kind of thought in the back of my mind, he thinks I'm Jewish. David, right? Yeah, it works. But I did really well there, and I never told him he was wrong, because hey, he was the manager. I had a job. It all went well, so that was good. As opposed to when I was in college a year or two later, and the professor was discussing ancient religious burials or religious burial customs. So I'm sitting there and well, I just let it all out. I liked the girl next to me. And when he called on me to explain to the class about Jewish burial customs, knowing that I liked her, and also knowing in the back of my mind that the Jewish people weren't known to be great romancers, I said to myself, oh, we can't go with this. So I got up, I said, whoa. I said, I'm Italian. I used to have an E on the end of my name. And that was that. That's a true story. Oh, gosh, this is fun. Thank you. This is really fun.
Did you stand up at one time?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to do sit down. My great-grandfather, Rocco, worked on the farm and worked in his father's store on Bellevue Avenue. He married Maria Colacerto, another Pleasant Mills Road, Hammonton name, of course. We're all interlocked. We get interlocked there somewhere around. Exactly.
Lazarus learned how to cut meat
Exactly.
from Rocco.
Right?
And then bought the store. Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Aunt Judy said. They eventually bought that store. Right. So he married Maria Colacerto. They had 13 children. Big family, more cousins. I only knew a few of them, and not that well. A couple of them I knew better, for sure. But I'm not going to try to list every name for you. It will just, you wouldn't remember them all anyway. But there's a few. Michael, he was the oldest. He was a very successful businessman in Hammonton, like many of you already know. But he was not only very successful, from what I know, he was very generous as well, giving land and money to the church, the hospital, and who knows what all else. And it's just a good testament. People that made it here wanted to give back to the town, and you still see that today, and that's good stuff. He had two daughters who I know many of you know. There's Margie Pulea and Dottie Bernardo. Dottie passed away a few months ago. God bless her. They're both sweet ladies. And that was his family. And I know their kids, they're cousins of mine, and I know them all, good people. There was James, the judge. He was also the mayor of Hammonton at different times, not all in one run, but at different times he was the mayor of Hammonton. And I don't know much about him except stories I've heard. That he had a big dog that followed him around all the time, everywhere he went, even in the diner, that dog was next to him. And that he was very soft-spoken. And they said being in his courtroom was quite the treat, because he would, with his soft voice, listen to someone plead their case, and they say he would go, yes, 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 yes. And you would think for sure he was going to let him go scot-free. And then, bam, he would lower the hammer on him, and justice served. So I would have loved to have seen that, but there were no videos back then. So. There was Aunt Jean. She was a Sween, married a Sweeney. I wouldn't know her if she was standing in this room, but I do know that her daughter Mimi, becoming one of my favorite cousins, and she's done a terrific job with the old Garfield DeMarco house on Bellevue and Packard. It looks great, which before it was Garfield's, that was an old Ruberton house going way back. So she got it back in the family. She's redoing the whole thing. It looks terrific. She's a sweetheart. Oh, I left the one for last. Uncle Louis, Louis Ruberton. He was a character. He was the baby. He was the 13th child. And let me tell you, he was the 13th child. I have some memories that just thinking about him make me laugh. His red pajamas, okay? He was famous for red pajamas. And this wasn't like Hugh Hefner type red pajamas, okay? These were red ski pajamas, okay? And he was a portly man, so there was a lot of red coming at you at one time. And he thought nothing of going visiting in his red pajamas. He would come to the house, take off his coat, and he'd have on the red pajamas. How do you forget something like that? I mean, you just can't. It sticks with you. His daughter Barbara, and he had his son Michael as well, but his daughter Barbara, a sweetheart, one of my favorite cousins. She just passed away last year. It's just shy of a year. What a shame. What a doll. But she was moving. She lived in Pennsylvania. Did you ever hear this story? You've heard this story. She lived in Pennsylvania, and she was moving. So Uncle Louis, he wasn't going for movers. He rounded up all the nephews and Uncle Buddy, who I'll get to later, to move. To help her move. Of course, it was a second-story apartment, and it was the hottest day of the summer. Well, Uncle Louis got there with us, and he found the biggest chair and a fan, and he propped it up in the middle of the living room, and he sat down with his shirt unbuttoned with the fan blowing on him. And every time we walked by him with this furniture sweating, he would go to my Uncle Buddy. He'd say, "Ooh, it's hot, buddy." Oh, you just can't forget this stuff. And my Uncle Buddy, every time he said it, he was sweating bullets for me. Oh, good stuff, good stuff. Oh, Uncle Louis. His wife Mary, a lot of you knew her. She was a sweet lady. She was the home ec teacher at the high school for years and years. You never left their house hungry. She'd break out steaks at midnight and start cooking up a storm. It was a great place to hang out. A lot of laughs, a lot of fun, good stuff. Get to my grandfather now. My grandfather was Prosper, Chubby, they called him. That was his nickname. He passed away when I was almost 2, in 1959. I wish I could have known that man. He was uneducated, but what a smart guy. He worked in his father's store here in Hammonton in the butcher shop, and then he eventually opened up his own store in Egg Harbor City. He moved in on top of the store, and my father said, because I asked my father, why did you grow up in Egg Harbor City? And he said, my father said, the best way to get along with 12 brothers and sisters is to live 10 miles down the road. And I can still remember him telling me that. And I guess it was true because he got along with them right to the end, to his death in 59. I wish I could have known him. He was a man of the town. He was a school board president, buildings, apartments, business dealings. Everybody loved my grandfather, Prosper, in Egg Harbor and Hammonton for that matter, because he sold the store in 1950 and he started building houses right here in Hammonton. He had Parkview Builders was the name of his business. And he built a lot of houses on Woodlawn and Marlyn Avenue. It's a good possibility that somebody here lived in one at one time or another. They're still there, and there's a whole bunch of them. And he built other houses around Hammonton. But like I say, he was cut short because he started that in 50 or 51, and in 59 he passed away. So it wasn't a long run, but it was a good run just the same. So I thought that was pretty interesting that his houses still stand today. My grandfather, Prosper, he was married to Anna Benvenuto of New York. They had 5 children. I'll just go through them quickly. There was Phyllis Rundio. She married Abe Rundio from Egg Harbor City, because they all grew up in Egg Harbor City. She married an Abe Rundio. I can still remember being at the house on some Sundays and the whole family be crowded around a little kitchen table and all the cousins be running around. There'd be an ashtray burning on every corner of the table with all of us running around. I don't know how we lived through it. It's a good thing there wasn't typhus back then, because they would have taken us away. It was just the way it was back then, though. You didn't think anything of it. Looking back, though, it would look so funny today to see that, but that's the way things were back then. It was different. There was Marie Peterson. She was married to Jim Peterson of Egg Harbor City. She's still doing well, spry, 91, and lives in North Carolina. Uncle Buddy. Everybody loved Uncle Buddy. As my father's only and young brother, and he lived with us for a while. Uncle Buddy, he was a neat guy. Had a beautiful white 59 or 60 Chevy convertible with a red interior. Really, everybody loved him. He worked at Whitehall for years. Everybody in town knew him. It was such a loss when he passed 7 years ago, approximately. It was just such a loss to lose him. And he helped me out a couple times, too. I can remember I was about 17, maybe, somewhere around there. And my father decided he was going to put a driveway around the house, around the one side of the garage. So there was like 3 or 4 or 5 pine trees that were growing up, like a little fence of pine trees. And then there was one beautiful flowering cherry tree that was offset from the others. So I said, Dad, because, I was trying to be helpful once in a while. I said, I'll borrow a saw and I'll cut those trees down for you and I'll get them out of there. He says, okay. He says, don't cut the cherry tree. I said, no problem. Well, I borrowed a chainsaw. Well, I was a little nervous because although I had used some tools before, chainsaws weren't really anything I had really used. So I'm concentrating now because I've heard these things can cut a lot. you can get hurt bad with a chainsaw. So now I put the saw in the middle of the yard. I get the gas, I do this, I do that. I start the saw, now I'm concentrating because I don't want to cut my leg off. I pick up the saw, now I don't look up. The first trunk I see, I'm going after. Well, guess what? Halfway through that tree, it dawned on me, oh my God, it's the cherry tree. I said, I am dead. So, about an hour later, my uncle, Buddy, and his wife, Phyllis, my mom and dad had gone out. About an hour later, they come pulling in the yard. And there, with this cut down cherry tree, well, my father gets out of the car. I thought he was going to kill me. He's walking over, he's astonished. Now, this is a guy that had all his grass named, okay, every day. So don't think that tree wasn't cherry. Well, luckily, my Uncle Buddy was there, because before my father could break into whatever he was going to break into, Uncle Buddy starts laughing and he goes, look, it's George Washington and the cherry tree. Well, my father had to start laughing at that point, and that saved me. And that was saved my butt that time. He sure did. So never forget stuff like that. Aunt Judy, she's here. She's my cool aunt. She had a 57 Chevy. White with purple, right? Pink. I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. White and pink, 57 Chevy. And she would take us riding around, and the Beach Boys would be playing live. Not live, but fresh, when it was new music, which it's hard to forget things like that. So that was good stuff. She was the fun aunt. She had a place down in Ventnor we used to go down to in the summer, go to the beach. Good stuff. No complaints. My dad was in the middle, Rocco Lewis. He grew up in Egg Harbor City, not Hammonton, although he knew his way around Hammonton. He was a high school football star. He played all sports, but football was really his thing. There was a big rivalry back in those days because Egg Harbor City had their own high school back then. And the Hammonton-Egg Harbor City rivalry was big. Well, this one year, I guess, I won't even guess the year. If I thought about it, I could figure it out, but I'm not. Hammonton was picked to beat Egg Harbor City bad. Well, guess what? Egg Harbor City won 13-0, and my dad scored all the points, which was pretty cool. He also went on to found the Hammonton Hawks. In approximately 1960, the first Hammonton Little League football team, along with Mike Delarentis and Charlie Gallagher. And I know I'm omitting one person, but I'm sorry. What?
Freddie Brown?
I thought maybe Freddie Brown, but I'm taking a guess on that. It could have been Freddie Brown. I'm just not positive about that. But they started the first Hammonton Hawks team back then. And he also was a founding member of the Rotary Club as well, and a number of other things. He joined the Air Force. He became a telegraph operator in Korea. He went on to work in Washington, D.C. He couldn't talk about what he did at work. It was top secret, and he could never talk about it. We never found out what he did in working in the government. But we do know that after he left Washington and went into private business, he built computer rooms and ran the computer departments at a couple different businesses in Philadelphia, right from Washington to computers. This was back when nobody really knew even what a computer was. So it just makes me wonder. I know now from things that I have read that the internet was being developed in Washington, D.C. at the same time my father was working there. So it's not beyond the realm of reason that he had, and his team, of course, not just him, had something to do with the internet. I'll never know. We'll never know for sure, but it's quite a possibility. So take that, Al Gore. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty neat, you know. If he could only see what the computers have come to today, it would just blow his mind. Because like I say, he was writing programs and working on them before anybody really even knew how to turn a computer on, most people. I can remember Steve and I going to visit him in Philadelphia once in a while, and he would show us the computer room. And it was a good-sized room, not as big as this room, but it was a good-sized room, specially cooled. All this IBM machinery all the way around the room with the big disk drives. You have more power in your pocket right now than he had in that whole room. It's just amazing. If he could only see today, you know, what it's become. And he was just way ahead of his time on that stuff. So it's neat stuff. And then he eventually, he was tired of that, and my brother and I were working in the restaurant business down the shore in the casinos, and we decided to buy and reopen the townhouse. And he passed away, unfortunately, just 11 months after that. But that's a whole nother story for another night. I don't want to keep you here till midnight, so we'll let the townhouse story just leave it at, it was God's grace, hard work, and good luck, and we survived, and that's the truth about that. So my father, we moved to Egg Harbor City, so my brother and I, in our younger years, younger years, grew up in Egg Harbor City, which I'm sure was much like growing up in Hammonton. They weren't worlds apart. And it was really a great time to grow up. And I know many of you can attest to how good it was growing up in a small town like Hammonton in America back then. I think a lot of younger people get cheated out of a lot of the stuff that we got to have fun with. But, you know, times change, and they have things we never thought could have dreamt of having. So I guess it all balances out. I mean, I can remember growing up there, and it was just terrific. Almost the end of an American innocence when I look back. Hitchhiking, this big, hitchhiking to the lake, to the river, to go fishing, to go swimming. We were allowed to leave school for lunch. I mean, we were given privilege. We didn't have to sneak out. You could leave school at lunch, go to the sub shop, and for less than $1, get a sub, chips, soda, and still have penny candy to bring back to class with you, to school with you. I mean, we had a lot more freedom, I think, than we give the kids today, and I don't know. We won't get all philosophical in the weeds, but maybe a little bit of freedom's a good thing. I don't know. It was a good way to grow up. I have great memories of growing up, and I know growing up in Hammonton is quite similar, although I was a few miles up the road. That's where I found out that I wasn't Italian, by the way. I was about 11 years old, and my friend in school asked me to come to his house and to come play after school and then have dinner. And okay, great. So I told my mother I was going after school this one day. So I get there, and I get in the house, and I walk in, and all the furniture's covered in plastic. And I looked, and then on the floor there was plastic runners going everywhere. And you had to stay on the plastic. You weren't allowed to get off of the plastic. You had to stay in the runways. I found that peculiar. Then it became time for dinner, and instead of eating in the kitchen upstairs, we went down to the basement because there was another kitchen in the basement where they actually ate. And his parents, they spoke Italian. The only Italian that we ever knew was we heard a few curse words, and we could say gabardini, rigatoni. That was it, but they're talking full-blown Italian, all this plastic. Let me tell you, nothing tells your guests don't stay too long than covering everything in plastic. So when I got home, I still remember, I got home, my mom said, Well, did you have a good time? I says, yes, dinner was good too. I said, but let me tell you something. I'm not Italian. I said, they're Italian, we're American. It was an eye-opener, because as a young kid, you hear, oh, your cousins, oh, my father's German, we're German, because you heard a lot of that in Egg Harbor City, not in Hammonton. And we're Italian, but we weren't, we were American. They were really Italian. Oh, my. Eventually, we moved back to Hammonton in 1970, and I went to high school here from my sophomore year on. Steve was here from 8th grade on. What a great place to go to high school. What a great place to live. We had St. Joe up the street. They had the greatest dances. Hammonton High dances, the lamest. St. Joe dances, terrific. But guess what? We were invited to come because we were part of the community and the high school in the community. So we were always invited to the St. Joe dances, and they were just a good time. Everybody had fun. And it was a really nice thing. It's just something about a small town. You can't get this when you're in a big regional school with 5,000 students from all over the place. Just one guy's personal feeling, you know. So it was good stuff growing up here, going to high school here. And I mean, although I was born in Hammonton, coming back to high school here is when I really started living here. I moved from Hammonton when I was 5, when my father went to work in Washington, and I went to the little school that's now the Historical Society office. That was Mrs. Rice's kindergarten class when it was behind the police station. And I can still remember being in there, Mrs. Rice. What a sweet, nice teacher. I can remember that. And yeah. I think I was only in kindergarten for a little while, though. Somebody told me it was only a few years. It was a library also, right?
Yes.
It was a library, right? Right. So then in 1983, I told you about the townhouse, and we're not going to get into that whole story. You know, in closing, I'd like to say that I'm in a unique position because I get to talk to people all the time. I've talked to a lot of people that live in Hammonton, and I talk to so many people that wish they lived in Hammonton, and I mean that sincerely. People come in for dinner from all over South Jersey to our place now. It took 40 years to get them there, but they're coming now. So, and I mean 201. They're just so in love with Hammonton. So many want to move here, looking for a house here. Good luck with that. And they just love this town. And what I've come up with is it's not the house that they love, because they could buy a house just as nice as any house in Hammonton anywhere. They want to be part of what we have here, and we have really something special. It's a spirit, it's a unity, it's helping each other, and it goes way back to all of our ancestors, and it really shows. And whatever you're doing, keep it up, because even the next generation coming, I can see is going to be a good one. There's a few nights a year where we have, especially Thanksgiving Eve, where we have so many people in our place, young people, because anybody over 30 with any smarts wants to get out of there, myself included, by 9 o'clock. And they pour in on Thanksgiving Eve and a few other nights of the year. And let me tell you, they are the most courteous, respectable, young people you could possibly ask for. I mean, it's really amazing when you have that many all together, all close and tight, that everybody is just so nice, young, friendly, good people. Whatever this town and you people are doing, and my ancestors as well, keep it up, because it's working and it shows. It really does. And may God continue to bless you all and bless our town. And that's it. Didn't you promise me a Manhattan?
You're gonna get a little car. That's all. So when I first stopped to see either Dave or Steve, so most of the time when I approach somebody, they just twist a couple of arms, saying, "Well, let me think about it, come back," and like that. He said, "Okay, count on it." That was it.
I thought you would forget.
Anyway, what he forgot tonight, what I thought was so important, was that, and how could I say anything, because this is our 101st speaker, and he was the most entertaining, and if you can entertain while you're telling the story, that's the best.
But
But
it was the
anyway,
101st?
101st.
Is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
So when Gabe was writing his picture book on Hammonton, he had any number of photos to pick from. What did he pick? He picked a photo of
Benedetto, which was Angelo, the first one to come over. His son Benedetto, which is my mother's grandfather, right on the cover. I don't have the book with me to show you though. I'm sorry, folks. But most of you have it at home, I'll bet. If you look at the cover, he's the tall one,
Tall guy.
suit,
Yeah.
bow tie, right? Bow tie?
I
can't
don't
remember
know,
now.
but
I'm not sure.
yeah, he's the leader.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I'll have to look when I go
Yeah,
home.
yeah, good
So-
stuff.
So I want to thank you, because I was always hazy about the Molinellis and the Carnicas and the Benedettos, how they all fit. And anyway, but yeah, you really have an inspiring story, and it's just,
Very
it's
good.
both
Thank you.
entertaining. Yeah,
Thank you
so-
very much.
And if you want a rerun of this, so you can come and hopefully, next Saturday, or this coming Saturday, and we'll have the tape on it.
Okay, great.
We can replay it
Great.
for,
Great.
you at the
Well,
museum.
I would like to
What's a copy?
get a copy of that tape. I want my daughter to see it.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
couldn't make it tonight,
Yeah.
so I would like her to see that.
And also that you have brought more of your.
We have our cheering
cheering
squad.
section than anybody else. So thank you so much. Yeah, okay.
It's a real pleasure.
Quick story, this morning, Carson.